Excellent. All right. Thank you, Matt, again for the introduction. And I'm Avi. I'm a Postgres tech lead at Percona. And without further ado, I would go ahead and start presenting. And so today we are going to talk about how we could build an enterprise-grade PostgreSQL server using Percona distribution for Postgres, right? So what is this talk all about, right? Let's consider your Postgres environments, and you are migrating from proprietary databases, let's say an Oracle, to Postgres. Now, there are a lot of assumptions that we always get to see, right? That most of the features are not free with Postgres. You may have to go with some kind of licensing or some kind of, you need to go ahead and pay in order to get some better security or high availability, or in order to do backups the right way, you may have to pay for it. But that's all assumption. So today we are going to show you how Percona distribution for Postgres has solved that, and how you could really build enterprise-grade Postgres using Percona distribution for Postgres. So just to let you know, we have Percona distribution for Postgres release for Postgres 11 as well as 12. And for 11, you could get it for the minor versions 5, 6, 7, and 8, and even for 12, the minor versions 2 and 3 are available. So you could go ahead and download them using the links, and you should be able to use them. So what's included in Percona distribution at the moment, right? You would be able to get Postgres, the community Postgres available with it, and you're also going to see some of the well-tested, and Percona basically has spent a lot of time testing and making sure that the extensions as well as the tools we choose satisfy the enterprise needs, and also made sure that they work the right way, right? So we got PG Repack, PG Audit, PG Backrest, and Petroni included in it, right? So you're going to go ahead and just download Percona distribution for Postgres, and you're going to see all of these included within it. So we're going to see what these extensions or tools do and how it helps to build an enterprise-grade Postgres shortly. But before going ahead with that, I would quickly go ahead with some of the myths that we come across, and how you could really overcome all of that and deploy Postgres and start using it happily. So some of the myths that we usually hear in the Postgres world are security is not free, or we cannot take a full backup that is good for point-in-time recovery. We cannot set up a high availability, it's not scalable. Options for database maintenance, such as if you want to rebuild a table or perform some maintenance operation, you may have to go through some downtime. And actually, I've just put a very short list here, right? So there are many more that we usually hear too. For example, I would want to port my application from Oracle to Postgres, and I need to use some functionalities that are only available with Oracle. For example, some of the DBMS functions, right? So most of these problems were already faced by somebody in the past, and somebody already worked on it. When I say somebody, it's not just one person. Many who have always wanted to migrate away from Oracle to Postgres for various reasons have always contributed back with the solutions of their problems, right? Or to their problems. So we have great extensions that even give a lot of compatibility for a lot of Oracle syntax, right? So you would be able to go ahead and even deploy such extensions, which are available as open source. So you really don't have to go for some kind of an enterprise licensing in order to get all such features. So what are the usual enterprise-grade Postgres features that we hear, right? So some features such as encryption, user management, wherein you do a proper segregation of users and roles, the ability to tune your database, right? So, and there is a much more bigger list, right? You want to go ahead and implement load balancing, scale your databases, and at the same time, implement connection pooling, do a proper auditing, monitoring, and build high availability using robust replication methods. And you also want to enable great reliable backups and perform maintenance tasks, partitioning, and you would also wish to see continuous bug fixes, and also want to make sure that any security vulnerabilities, if they're observed, you want to go ahead and get the fixes for that incorporated to your database software. So all of these are mostly some of the enterprise grade features somebody would expect for any database and even for Postgres. Now the question is, do you have to pay to get all of these? The answer is no. Let's see how, right? We'll discuss most of them in this 30 minutes webinar or the talk, right? So some of these are already blogged and available on Percona blog posting platform, like how you could secure your Postgres database cluster, high availability backup, connection poolers. Or I mean, we have blogged about it in the past, and you could go ahead and take a look at these blog posts too. So security in Postgres. So Postgres by default includes a lot of features that satisfy a lot of security standards. You have a built-in firewall, which is nothing but the host-based authentication. So you could restrict which user from which IP from to which database can he connect or can he not connect, right? So you could go ahead and do much more granular settings and even implement several authentication methods. And likewise, you could also go ahead and implement user management using roles and privileges. So you could have roles created, like specifically a read-write role or a read-only role, schema-specific roles, or application logic-specific roles, and you would be able to assign roles. And at the same time, you would also be able to even restrict row level access. And that's something that's available with Postgres too. That's part of the Percona distribution for Postgres, as well as the community Postgres. And you could also implement encryption using file system level encryption, of course, but at the same time, you also have an extension called PG Crypto that could help you at a great extent. And also, you could enable detailed logging and debugging with Postgres, and that's available already. And there is an extension called PG Audit, which is also part of the Percona distribution for Postgres, that allows you to enable logging that's compliant, that basically compliant with a lot of ISO and all of the compliances too. So it would help us even see any kind of SQL injections, right? Or several things that you would not be able to just see with the detailed logging that you may enable. So, and that's part of Percona distribution for Postgres. And for security bug fixes, how do you know about the bug fixes or any security fixes, right? You should be subscribing to Postgres mailing list, and also follow Percona blog post. Go ahead and subscribe to the Percona blog post if you haven't done yet, because we keep posting blogs about any major fixes usually, right? And also if in case we found a security vulnerability which has been fixed as part of the minor version in Postgres, right? I mean, you would usually see a blog post from us. So it's good to subscribe to the mailing list and blog posts so that you would get to know about it and you could go ahead and implement that fix. Talking about backup strategy, Postgres by default includes a consistent online backup tool, which is PG-based backup, right? And it also helps you achieve point-in-time recovery. Likewise, Postgres is also not only just the physical backup tool, Postgres has also got the logical backup tool, right? Like PG dump and to restore, PG restore. And you would also be able to enable archiving, because the reason why I'm emphasizing on these tools or the archiving today is because in most of the commercial databases, you will not be able to get such solutions included with the standard versions. You may have to go ahead and choose the enterprise version of the product, right? But this is all included with Postgres. At the same time, PG-based backup may not be helpful if you have a database which is several terabytes or hundreds of gigabytes in size. And if you would want to go ahead and implement incremental backup, differential backup, or directly stream your backup to cloud. So what Percona distribution what Percona did is that we have gone ahead and included PG Backrest, which is another umbrella project, and it's open source. So PG Backrest is included in Percona distribution for Postgres, and that actually solves a lot of problems. For example, you would be able to perform incremental, differential backups, and even parallel backup, right? And you would be able to encrypt the repository, and you could basically go ahead and stream your backup to Amazon S3 or Azure Blob Store, right? So it's integrated with cloud. So PG Backrest is robust, and so that's a backup tool that you could really rely on. And it's a very active project, and yeah. Talking about connection pooling and load balancing. As you know, Postgres is process-based, and so each connection that you establish from application to Postgres is a process. So when too many connections come in from app, and basically the activity goes on in a way that you establish a connection, you disconnect a connection, you establish another connection, disconnect the connection again. So this establishing and disconnecting, like terminating the connection, is actually an overhead in Linux. So you would rather want to prefer having an application level connection pooler, which is usually preferred, right? So if you do not have a robust application connection pooler that is doing a good job, you could go ahead and implement external connection poolers. So you could go ahead and use the connections poolers that you see here, PG Bouncer or PG Pool 2, on top of the distribution. So it's not part of the distribution yet, but it's not that you could not use it, right? So you could use PG Bouncer, which is again open source, and that understands the Postgres protocol, very actively developed, and also a lot of Postgres community members have contributed to PG Bouncer, and you could implement that as a connection pooler and really see great benefits. At the same time, PG Pool 2 also is a connection pooler. However, that is good for performing some important or good in achieving some of the important functionalities. And one of them is, if you are not able to distinguish between writes and reads, right? In that case, you would be able to go ahead and use a PG pool and let it distinguish between reads and writes from the app, and let it redirect the connections automatically to a primary or a standby. Because what really happens is that you would want to use the computing power of all the database servers, right, which are even in replication. In Postgres, you could also read from the standbys. So you would be able to go ahead and perform reads from the standby and writes to the primary. So, and you could directly connect to a PG pool too, and that automatically redirects the connections to a primary or a standby. However, there are some kind of, it's not completely automatic. You may have to go ahead and incorporate some changes too within your application, the way you do things. But based on the testing or kind of benchmarkings that we did, PG Bouncer outperforms when you just use it as a connection pooler, right? So, and you could use HA proxy like tools for, and it's open source to HA proxy. And so that can be used for load balancing between, load balancing the reads between multiple standby machines or primary and standby machines. So all of these are available and heavily used by the Postgres world in order to scale the scale the Postgres instances. And there is a talk on the connection pooling shortly. I think the next talk. And talking about high availability and automatic failover, Postgres has got robust replication methods already included. So you do not have to go ahead and get some kind of an enterprise or think of an enterprise solution, again, there is no need of it, right? So it has got streaming replication, which could also allow you to build cascaded replication, right? And also you could make it synchronous, asynchronous, a hot standby in the sense your standbys could accept reads. So you could use the computing power of the standby. So Postgres has got streaming replication already included. And you would also be able to configure logical replication with Postgres. And since Postgres 10, you have logical replication and logical decoding part of the Postgres source, the community version. So everything that you see here is also part of Percona distribution for Postgres, right? And for automatic failover, you have a robust HA solution, which is it's Percona, right? It's a template which can be used for achieving automatic failover. So that can be used on top of a replication cluster, which to monitor the primary and standbys and perform the automatic failover seamlessly, right? So Percona architecture looks something like this, right? So where you have 3 instances, and Percona could detect the, if in case the primary or the master goes down, it would get the consensus from a consensus key value store, a distributed consensus key value store like etcd. That's helping Percona in the leader elections, and Percona would perform the failover seamlessly. And you could use HA proxy for your application, HA proxy between your application and the Percona cluster. So HA proxy could include or could use the Percona APIs or REST APIs to determine what's a primary or what's a standby. So that way you would be able to go ahead and perform a seamless failover without any manual intervention. And this is possible with Postgres, right? So there are people who are really using it extensively, and it's deployed at several customer locations already, and everybody are happy with it. So likewise, we have seen the advantages of Percona and made it part of Percona distribution for Postgres. So you get it included, and it's an open source tool too. So talking about extensions, Postgres is feature rich and completely community driven, right? So you have the ability to add extensions that serve some purpose. For example, you have an extension called pgstat statements. So you would want to see something like AWR in Oracle, for example, wherein you want to see what happened in the past. What are the queries that have run in the past, and what was the activity, or how much memory, or how much time has it taken, right? So pgstat statements contains the query stats, right? So you would be able to go ahead and see the queries that have run, the total consumption time, and the average consumption time, or the execution time, and how much of the blocks were fetched from memory or from disk, right? So all of that statistics are available. Likewise, there is an extension called pgrepack. So some time back, I mentioned, like, most of the problems that we think of today, if we are using Postgres for the first time, these were problems which somebody has already faced in the past, and they've contributed back. So most of the extensions that you have actually seen, or you see in the list here, of course, I haven't included a huge number of extensions here, but most of these are the contributions in that way, right? The users have contributed, and they are eventually made so robust with feedback and a lot of feature requests, etc. So pgrepack is an extension that would enable you to perform online table reorg, or you could rebuild a table online while your application is still writing to it. At the same time, you would be able to go ahead and rebuild indexes, and you could do a parallel table rebuild so that your table rebuild really goes faster, right? Because if you do a vacuum full on Postgres, it acquires an exclusive lock on the table. So pgrepack is already included in Percona distribution for Postgres, And the pgstat statements and most of the extensions that you see here are already part of the contrib module. So they are already included with Postgres if you install Postgres contrib, right? Contrib package. So likewise, there are some more extensions that you could, or tools that you could install on top of either Percona distribution for Postgres or even the community Postgres that should help you. For example, PL Profiler. If you want to write stored procedures and you want to see at what line of code the execution is really taking time, you would be able to see that with PL Profiler. That has got a beautiful, I mean, it's a rich HTML text that you would actually see like an HTML file, wherein you would be able to go ahead and point, at what line of code is it at a conditional where time is spent more, or is it a specific query that's taking more time within the stored procedure, or is it internally calling a function which is actually taking more time, and what's happening within that nested function. So all of that information is available with PL Profiler. And Oraface, some time back I was mentioning that you would want to port your applications to Postgres easily. And Oraface is an extension that has got lots of Oracle specific terminologies built in. For example, you want to use the dual table, for example, or there are a lot of DBMS functions, or that you would want to go ahead and use, like sysdate, or even so. All of these, if you want to still continue using in your application, and you want to you do not want to go ahead and make changes in your application, you want to make it a faster migration, you could use extension like Oraface, which is again open source, right? So you could use it for free. And there are several language extensions, like not only PL/PGSQL, but you could also write in Python, Perl, Java. So Postgres is extensible that way too. So whichever language you're comfortable with, you could write procedures in that language. And in order to talk to remote heterogeneous databases, you also have foreign data wrappers. So you could use foreign data wrappers as well on top of Percona distribution for Postgres, as well as the community Postgres. So these enable you to join a remote Postgres or Oracle database, a table on a remote Postgres or an Oracle database, right? So personally, like I've done data migration from Oracle to Postgres in a much faster way using Oracle FDW, right? And that's really robust. And it also helps you even convert the Oracle schema to Postgres up to a certain extent, right? So, and all of these are available for free. I mean, you do not have to pay for these extensions, right? So again, coming back to the original point, most of the features that we assume are not available for free, and that need to be part of an enterprise, kind of an enterprise version. We need to realize that that's not the fact anymore, right? So most of the extensions are available for us, and most of tools are already contributed and available for free to use. So you could also go ahead and enable detailed logging of activity in Postgres, like I said some time back, and you could log DDLs, you could log statements that are running for more than a certain time, right? You could even say, you could set log min duration statement. That's a parameter which you could set to say, okay, log all the statements that are taking more than 1 second or 10 milliseconds, and you log it. And then you could use PG Badger like tools to analyze the logs, right? And it would print you a detailed report, which is so robust and also very, very clear. And most of the issues are really solved when you look at a PG Badger report. Addition to that, PMM, like Percona Monitoring and Management, like PMM is a monitoring solution available with Percona for free again. So it's contributed and developed by Percona. You have query analytics in PMM that would give you a greater insight into the query execution, right? Like what queries are taking how much time to complete, and how is the history of that query, right? Like how much time has it taken in the past, and some of the system resources utilization. So you could really get to a lot of granular data, and that would really help you, uh, you know, fix a lot of performance issues. So you could use, again, all of these for free on top of either Percona distribution for Postgres or even community Postgres. And talking about monitoring, there are several open source monitoring solutions like PMM, Nagios, and you could use even Grafana and Postgres Exporter, PG Observer. So a lot of these are available for monitoring. However, you could go ahead and try PMM today, because PMM, Percona Monitoring and Management. So there's a monitoring tool that's available for not just Postgres, but also for MySQL and MongoDB. So you could use or monitor a wide variety of databases or database technologies using just one monitoring tool. And so because we discussed about, like a connection pooler, a load balancer, a high availability and automatic failover solution, and monitoring. So you could build a robust Postgres architecture that actually looks like this, right? So you have PG Bouncer as a connection pooler deployed on the application server, and that's talking to HA proxy, right? And then HA proxy determines what's a primary or a standby, and then automatically, if application server connects to PG Bouncer and it wants to do a writes connection, right? You could go ahead and set the database alias in a way that it connects to the, for example, in your application logic, if you're able to distinguish between writes and reads. So what it means is you should be able to use different connection strings for writes and reads, which is the right way of building an application. So if that is happening, you would be able to go ahead and use PG Bouncer and say, okay, if it's reads, ask for a specific port, and if it's writes, ask for a specific port. And then HA proxy would automatically, based on that, should be able to go ahead and use the Patroni's REST API to go ahead and see, okay, what is a primary and what's a standby, right? And should be able to redirect. And we have, so in some time back, I was showing you in one of the slides, the blog post that we have done for high availability. So you would be able to see the HA proxy configuration file and how we have achieved this. And it's not the first time that we are kind of thinking of such a solution. This is already existing, and it's being used by lots of customers already. And you could go ahead and deploy PMM as a monitoring tool and then a backup server. So all of these make a robust Postgres setup completely for free, either using Percona distribution for Postgres or even just community Postgres. So all these extensions are already part of Percona distribution for Postgres. We already discussed about it: PGDPAC, PG Audit, PG Backrest, and Petroni, right? So, with that, I would like to conclude my session, and we will see you again at Percona Live Online.